I'm not broken. I'm rewired.
The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage. Midnight oil changes weren't unusual for me. Heck, working on my beat-up Ford pickup was cheaper than therapy, but something about tonight felt different. The phone's shrill ring cut through the silence like a blade. "Jack Morrison here," I answered, wiping my hands on an old rag. "Mr. Morrison? This is St. Mary's Hospital. Your son Sam is in the emergency room. You need to come immediately." The world tilted sideways. "What happened? Is he— Sir, please just come as quickly as you can." I grabbed my keys and ran. The 20-minute drive to the hospital took me 8. My mind raced faster than my truck's engine, conjuring every possible disaster. Sam was 19, a sophomore at State, built like a linebacker, but with his mother's sharp intellect. What could have put him in the ER at midnight on a Tuesday? The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor made everything look sickly and surreal. I found Sam in bed 3, his left leg elevated in a cast, his face a canvas of bruises. But his eyes, those were what stopped me cold. They burned with a mixture of pain and rage I'd never seen before. "Dad," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm glad you're here." "Jesus, Sam, what happened? Car accident?" He shook his head slowly. "I went home to grab some textbooks I forgot. Walked into our house and found Mom in your bedroom with her boss. That bastard Carson Williams." My blood turned to ice water. "What?" "They were going at it like animals, Dad, right there in your bed. When I told Carson to get the heck out of our house, he called his security guys. 2 of them. They said I was trespassing and needed to learn some manners." I stared at my son's battered face, processing his words. Elizabeth, my wife of 22 years, and Carson Williams, the senior partner at her law firm. The same Carson Williams who'd been coming to our barbecues for the past 5 years, shaking my hand, drinking my beer, calling me buddy. "They broke your leg?" One of them shoved me down the stairs, said it was an accident, but his smile told a different story. Sam's jaw clenched. "Mom just stood there watching, Dad. She didn't even try to help me." The rage that flooded through me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not even in Middle East, when insurgents had ambushed my convoy, had I felt this pure, crystalline fury. This was personal. This was family. Where are they now? Probably still at the house. The security guys said they'd stick around to make sure there were no more interruptions. I kissed Sam's forehead and headed for the door. "Dad, don't do anything stupid." I paused in the doorway. "Don't worry, son. I'm way past stupid. I'm heading straight for brilliant." The drive home gave me time to think, which was both a blessing and a curse. 22 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage we'd nearly paid off. Elizabeth had been pulling away for months, working late, taking weekend trips for conferences. I had attributed it to her partnership track at Williams, Hartley, and Associates. Turns out I was half right. She was definitely getting closer to a partner. My hands were steady as I pulled into our driveway. Elizabeth's BMW was there, along with Carson's silver Jaguar and a black Suburban I didn't recognize. Security, no doubt. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out my Colt Point .357. Military habits die hard, and I'd kept it clean and loaded since my discharge. The front door was unlocked. I could hear voices from upstairs, Elizabeth's laugh, high and girlish in a way I hadn't heard in years. Carson's deep baritone responding with something that made her giggle again. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. The bedroom door was open. Elizabeth sat on our bed in a silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas, while Carson paced near the window in his expensive suit, minus the jacket and tie. "Well, well," I said from the doorway. "Don't let me interrupt the executive meeting." Elizabeth spun round, her face going white. Carson straightened, his politician's smile sliding into place like a mask. "Jack," Carson said smoothly, "this is awkward, but we're all adults here. These things happen." These things. I stepped into the room, keeping the tool at my side but visible. "You mean breaking my son's leg, or screwing my wife in my bed?" I want to be clear on which things we're discussing. 2 large men appeared in the hallway behind me, the security team. I turned slightly, keeping both them and Carson in my peripheral vision. "Your son was interfering with private business," one of them said. He had the build of an ex-linebacker and the dead eyes of someone who'd done worse than break college kids' legs. "Private business in my house, with my wife?" I raised the tool, not pointing it at anyone in particular, just making sure everyone could see it clearly. Gentlemen, I'm a veteran with PTSD and a very bad night behind me. I'm also standing in my own bedroom, which gives me certain legal advantages. I suggest you reconsider your career choices. The security guys exchanged glances. Carson stepped forward. Jack, let's be reasonable. Elizabeth and I have developed feelings for each other. It's unfortunate about your son, but get on your knees. Excuse me? You heard me. Get on your knees and crawl out of my bedroom. All three of you. Carson's face flushed red. I'm not going to. I raised the tool to shoulder level, still not pointing it directly at anyone. Carson, you've got about 10 seconds to decide whether your dignity is worth more than your life. And before your muscle here gets any ideas, remember that I can put 6 rounds center mass before either of them clears leather. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Then Carson slowly sank to his knees. This is humiliating, Elizabeth hissed. Good, I replied. That's the point. I watched Carson Williams, senior partner, pillar of the community, crawl across my bedroom carpet and down my stairs like a dog. His security team followed, their faces burning with embarrassment. Elizabeth wrapped her robe tighter and glared at me with pure hatred. You'll pay for this, Jack. I'll destroy you. Get in line, sweetheart. It's going to be a long one. The next morning brought consequences. I woke up on the couch. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that bed, to find Elizabeth gone. Her clothes, her jewelry, her expensive makeup collection, all of it vanished like she'd never existed. She'd left divorce papers on the kitchen counter with a note. My attorney will be in touch. Of course, her attorney would be in touch. She was sleeping with him. I drove to the hospital to check on Sam. His sister Anna was there, her perfectly manicured fingers flying across her phone screen. At 17, Anna had inherited her mother's ambition and her grandfather's trust fund. She looked up when I entered, her expression cold. Dad, what did you do? I protected our family's dignity, something your mother seems to have forgotten about. Mom says you threatened to end Mr. Williams. She says you're having some kind of breakdown. Sam shifted in his hospital bed. Anna, they broke my leg. Dad didn't start this. Mr. Williams says you attacked him first, Sam, that you were drunk and belligerent. I stared at my daughter, seeing Elizabeth's calculating eyes looking back at me. And you believe him over your own brother? Anna's silence was answer enough. The next few days blurred together in a haze of humiliation and rage. Elizabeth had moved in with Carson, and somehow the story spreading around town painted me as the villain. The version making the rounds had me as a jealous, unstable veteran who'd attacked an innocent businessman and his own wife. Carson's money and influence had turned my justified anger into a cautionary tale about PTSD and domestic violence. I lost my job at Morrison Construction, a company I'd built from nothing after my discharge. Turns out Carson sat on the board of directors for half the businesses in town, and word had come down that I was unreliable and potentially dangerous. 20 years of reputation destroyed in a week. My old friend Mickey Torino found me at Sullivan's bar on Friday night, drowning my sorrows in cheap whiskey. Jack, you look like heck. Feel worse. I gestured to the empty stool beside me. Come to gloat? Mickey had been my best man, my business partner in the early days, my brother in everything but blood. He owned a boxing gym downtown and still carried himself like the middleweight contender he'd been in his youth. Come to talk sense. You want to hurt them? Don't get mad. Get even. And get smart about it. I'm listening. Carson Williams didn't get rich by being nice. Men like him have enemies, secrets, weaknesses. You just need to find them. And then what? Mickey smiled, and for a moment I saw the fighter he used to be. Then you hit them where it really hurts. Their reputation, their money, their pride. That's not exactly legal advice, Mick. Who said anything about illegal? You want to destroy someone in this town, you don't need to break the law, you just need to be smarter than they are. He was right, of course. I'd been thinking like a soldier when I needed to think like a strategist. Carson and Elizabeth had won the first round by controlling the narrative. Time to change the story. I spent the weekend planning. Military training dies hard, and I approached this like any other mission. Gather intelligence, identify targets, plan the operation, execute with precision. Carson Williams was 54 years old, twice divorced, no children. He'd built his law firm from a small practice into the most influential legal operation in the county through a combination of political connections and ruthless business tactics. He owned a mansion on Lake Morrison, drove expensive cars, and had his fingers in every major development project in the region. But every man has weaknesses. I started with the basics, Monday morning found me in the public library researching property records, court filings, and newspaper archives. Carson's divorces had been messy affairs, sealed by the court but whispered about in legal circles. His first wife had accused him of gambling problems. His second had mentioned inappropriate relationships with subordinates before the records went dark. Elizabeth's law firm specialized in municipal contracts and zoning disputes. Dry stuff, but profitable when you knew which palms to grease. I made a list of their major clients and cross-referenced them with city council voting records. Patterns emerged. Williams, Hartley & Associates had a remarkable success rate in getting their clients' projects approved, even when those projects faced significant public opposition. Tuesday, I visited Sam in the hospital. His leg was healing well, but his anger burned as hot as mine. Dad, I've been thinking about what happened. There's something else. What? When I walked in on them, they were looking at documents spread across the bed, legal papers, blueprints, something that made Carson really nervous when I showed up. He gathered everything up real quick, like he didn't want anyone to see. Any idea what kind of documents? City planning stuff, maybe? I saw the municipal seal on one of them. Interesting. Carson and Elizabeth weren't just having an affair. They were mixing business with pleasure. In my experience, that's when powerful men make their biggest mistakes. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor. Anna showed up at my apartment, her usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. Dad, can we talk? Depends. You here to deliver more messages from your mother? She flinched. I wanted to apologize. I've been hearing things at school, around town. Maybe I was too quick to judge. What kind of things? Mr. Williams has a reputation. Some of the older girls at school, their sisters who work downtown, they say he's inappropriate with young women. Handsy. There was a girl who worked at his firm last summer. She quit suddenly and won't talk about why. I felt a cold satisfaction. What's her name? Jessica Martinez. She's a senior at State now, like Sam. Anna, I need you to understand something. Your mother made her choice, but you're still my daughter, and I love you no matter what. This thing between me and them, it doesn't have to include you. Tears welled in her eyes. I know, Dad. I thought Mom was perfect, you know? Finding out she's just as messed up as everyone else is hard. I hugged her tight, and for the first time in weeks, something inside my chest loosened just a little. Thursday morning, I drove to State University and found Jessica Martinez in the campus coffee shop. She was a small, dark-haired girl with intelligent eyes and the wary posture of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. Jessica, I'm Jack Morrison. I think we need to talk about Carson Williams. Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. My son Sam is in the hospital because Carson's security team broke his leg. My wife is sleeping with Carson, and he's using his influence to destroy my reputation around town. I think you and I have something in common. She stared at me for a long moment, then sat down heavily. What do you want? The truth. What happened when you worked at his firm? The story came out slowly, painfully. Jessica had been a summer intern, bright and ambitious, hoping to get a recommendation for law school. Carson had started with small things, compliments on her appearance, unnecessary physical contact, invitations to working dinners that felt more like dates. When she'd tried to maintain professional boundaries, he'd made her life miserable. Impossible deadlines, public humiliation, threats about her future in law. The breaking point had come at the firm's summer party. Carson had cornered her in his office, drunk and aggressive. When she'd fought him off and threatened to report him, he'd laughed. Who's going to believe a scholarship kid from the wrong side of town over me? He'd said. I own this city, little girl. Cross me and you'll never work in law anywhere. Did you report it? To who? The police? The bar association? Carson Williams plays golf with half of them? She wiped her eyes. I just wanted it to go away. Jessica, what if I told you there might be a way to make him pay for what he did to you? And to my family? She looked up and I saw something fierce flicker in her eyes. I'm listening. We spent the next hour planning. Jessica still had contacts at the firm, other interns and junior associates who'd witnessed Carson's behavior, but been too afraid to speak up. More importantly, she remembered seeing documents in Carson's office that seemed questionable. City contracts that hadn't gone through proper bidding processes. Zoning variances approved unusually quickly. The kind of paperwork that might interest federal investigators if it fell into the right hands. There's something else, she said as we prepared to leave. Your wife, Elizabeth. The other women at the firm, they don't like her. She's been throwing her weight around since she started sleeping with Carson, acting like she's already a partner, making enemies. Enemies can be useful. There's a woman named Patricia Hartley. She's the other founding partner's daughter, works in municipal law. She and Elizabeth have been feuding over the Henderson Development Project. Patricia thinks Elizabeth is cutting corners, maybe even breaking rules to get approvals. I filed that information away. In my experience, office politics could be more vicious than actual warfare. Friday, I paid a visit to Mickey's gym. The familiar smell of sweat and leather was comforting, a reminder of simpler times when problems could be solved with fists instead of lawyers. "You look better," Mickey observed as I worked the heavy bag. "More focused. I'm getting my bearings. This isn't going to be quick, but it's going to be thorough. What do you need?" "Information. You know people in this town, people who owe you favors. I need to know everything about Carson Williams that isn't in the public record. His habits, his weaknesses, his secrets." Mickey grinned. "Now you're thinking like a fighter. Give me a week." The following week, Mickey's network delivered. Carson Williams was a creature of habit, which made him predictable. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he had lunch at the Riverside Club with various city officials and business leaders. Friday nights, he gambled at an underground poker game in the back room of Torino's restaurant, Mickey's cousin's place. Saturday mornings, he played golf at the country club with the mayor and 2 city councilmen. More interesting were his financial habits. Carson lived well beyond even his substantial legitimate income. The mansion, the cars, the expensive suits, it all suggested money coming from somewhere other than legal fees. Mickey's contacts in the banking community whispered about cash deposits that didn't match his reported earnings. "There's something else," Mickey told me over coffee. "Remember Tony Ricci from the old neighborhood? He's a private investigator now, specializes in insurance fraud and divorce cases. He owes me a favor from way back." Tony Ricci looked like an accountant, but had the instincts of a bloodhound. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. "Mickey says you need help with Carson Williams. That's going to be expensive and dangerous. Williams has connections." "I'm not asking you to break the law, Tony. I just need information that's already out there, put together in ways that tell a story." "What kind of story?" "The kind that explains how a small-town lawyer affords $1 million lifestyle. The kind that might interest the IRS or the FBI or the State Ethics Commission." Tony smiled. "That kind of story. I like it. Give me 2 weeks and $5,000. I didn't have $5,000, but I had something better. My construction company might be dead, but I still owned the equipment and the contracts. A few phone calls to old clients, and I had enough work lined up to cover Tony's fee. Meanwhile, I kept building my network. Jessica introduced me to 3 other women who'd had uncomfortable encounters with Carson. None of them were willing to go public, but they were willing to talk to the right investigator if the time came. Patricia Hartley proved to be an unexpected ally. Elizabeth's office rival was a sharp-featured woman in her 30s with her father's legal mind and her own grudges against Carson's management style. "Your wife is in over her head," she told me during a carefully orchestrated chance encounter at the courthouse. "She thinks sleeping with Carson makes her untouchable. But she's making enemies faster than she's making friends." "What kind of enemies?" "The kind that remember when she was just Jack Morrison's wife, playing at being a lawyer. Elizabeth's gotten sloppy since she started her affair. She's cutting corners on research, delegating important work to paralegals, showing up late to client meetings. Carson's protecting her for now, but if his situation changes, she'll be expendable." "Exactly. And when that happens, there will be a line of people waiting to push her off the cliff." I filed that information away too. Elizabeth had always been ambitious, but she'd also been careful. Love, or lust, was making her reckless. In my experience, reckless people make fatal mistakes. 2 weeks later, Tony Ricci delivered a manila folder that was worth every penny I'd paid him. Carson Williams wasn't just living beyond his means. He was funding his lifestyle through a complex web of kickbacks, inflated legal fees, and what amounted to legalized extortion. The Henderson Development Project was the crown jewel. Carson's firm had represented the developers while simultaneously advising the city on zoning issues. The conflict of interest was staggering, but more importantly, it was illegal. Carson had steered nearly $2 million in city contracts to companies that had paid his firm consulting fees that were really bribes. "There's more," Tony said. "Your wife isn't just sleeping with him. She's been helping him launder money through fake legal research projects. Elizabeth's been billing the city for work that was never done, then splitting the payments with Carson. I stared at the documents, feeling a cold satisfaction. This goes to the FBI? Eventually. But if you want maximum impact, you need to be smart about timing and presentation. What do you suggest? Carson's got that big fundraiser next month, the one where he's announcing his run for city council. Half the town's elite will be there, including reporters from the state paper. If this information surfaced then, in a very public way, I smiled, it would destroy him completely. Him and anyone associated with him, including your wife. Perfect. But I wasn't content to wait a month. Carson and Elizabeth had humiliated me publicly. Turnabout was fair play. I started with small things. Anonymous tips to the local newspaper about Carson's expensive lifestyle and questionable client relationships. Carefully worded questions at city council meetings about the bidding processes for municipal contracts. The poker game was my first real target. Mickey's cousin Sal was happy to help, especially after I explained what Carson had done to my family. Friday night, I sat in the back booth of Torino's restaurant, watching Carson lose badly at cards. He was drinking too much, betting recklessly, and getting increasingly agitated as his luck turned sour. When he stumbled to the bathroom, I followed. "Carson, fancy meeting you here." He turned, swaying slightly. "Jack, shouldn't you be home crying into your beer?" "Actually, I've been keeping busy, learning interesting things about city contracts and legal ethics. You'd be surprised what turns up in public records if you know where to look." His face sobered quickly. "What are you talking about?" "The Henderson project, the Riverside casino proposal, the municipal parking garage. Should I go on?" Carson's face went white. "You don't know what you're messing with." "Sure I do. I'm messing with a corrupt lawyer who thinks his money and connections make him untouchable. But here's the thing about corruption, Carson. It's like a house of cards. Pull out the right piece, and the whole thing comes crashing down." I left him standing there, hands shaking, and walked back to my booth. Through the window, I watched him make a phone call, probably to Elizabeth. Good, let them both sweat. The next week brought escalation. Elizabeth called, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Jack, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Carson says you've been making threats, spreading lies about his business practices. This has to stop." "Or what? You'll have his security team break my other son's leg?" "This isn't a joke. You're playing with forces you don't understand." "I understand them perfectly, Liz. I understand that you and your boyfriend have been stealing from the city. I understand that he's been making unwanted advances toward young women for years. I understand that both of you thought you could destroy my family without consequences." Silence stretched across the phone line. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "Justice. And I'm going to get it, with or without your cooperation." She hung up. 2 days later, I got a visit from Detective Ray Kowalski, an old friend from my Army Reserve days. Ray looked uncomfortable as he sat in my living room. "Jack, I've got to ask you some questions. Carson Williams filed a complaint, says you've been stalking him, making threats. Have you seen any evidence of stalking, Ray?" "No, but have you heard any recordings of me making threats?" "No, but Jack, you need to be careful. Williams has juice in this town. He could make your life very difficult." "More difficult than it already is?" Ray sighed. "Look, between you and me, I think the guy's a scumbag, but he's a connected scumbag, and he's got the mayor's ear. Just watch yourself, okay?" After Ray left, I realized Carson was getting desperate. Good. Desperate men make mistakes. I decided to apply more pressure. Jessica Martinez had given me the names of other women who'd had problems with Carson. I reached out to them carefully, building a network of witnesses who might be willing to speak up if the right opportunity presented itself. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Anna called me, her voice excited. "Dad, I think I found something important." "What?" "Remember how you asked me to pay attention to Mom's behavior, her schedule? She's been going to the office on Sundays, staying for hours. That's weird, right? Mom always said Sundays were for family." "Very weird. Any idea what she's doing there?" "I followed her last Sunday. She met with Carson and some man I didn't recognize. They had boxes of documents, and they were feeding papers into a shredder, lots of papers. Document destruction. That was either very good news or very bad news, depending on what they were destroying and whether copies existed elsewhere. Anna, this is important. Did you recognize the third man?" I took a picture. She sent it to my phone. He looked nervous, kept checking his watch. I forwarded the picture to Tony Ritchie. His response came back within an hour. That's David Chen, senior accountant at Morrison Bank. If he's destroying documents with Williams, it's probably financial records they don't want investigators to see. The noose was tightening. With Tony's help, I began setting up the endgame. The fundraiser was still 2 weeks away, but I needed to ensure that Carson and Elizabeth would be completely exposed when the moment came. That meant gathering evidence they couldn't destroy and witnesses they couldn't intimidate. The key was David Chen. A little research revealed that he was in serious financial trouble, gambling debts, a messy divorce, and a lifestyle he couldn't afford on a bank accountant's salary. Perfect leverage for someone like Carson, and perfect vulnerability for someone like me. I arranged to meet Chen at a coffee shop near the bank. He was a nervous, sweating man in his 40s who jumped every time someone walked past our table. "Mr. Chen, I think we can help each other." "I don't know what you're talking about. Carson Williams, the documents you've been helping him hide, the money you've been moving through, accounts that don't officially exist." His face went gray. "How do you—" "I know because I've been investigating Carson for weeks. I know about the kickbacks, the inflated legal fees, the municipal contracts that were rigged from the start. What I don't know is how deep you're in, and whether you want to be there when everything collapses." Chen stared into his coffee cup. He said it was just temporary, just moving money around to avoid some tax complications. He said no one would get hurt. "People are already hurt, David. My son is in the hospital. Young women have been driven out of their careers. The city's been robbed of millions of dollars. And now Carson's getting desperate, which means he's going to start looking for scapegoats." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when the FBI starts investigating Carson Williams, and they will, they're going to want to know about everyone who helped him. The people who cooperate early, who provide evidence and testimony, they get deals. The people who stay loyal to the end, they go to prison." Chen's hands were shaking. "What do you want from me?" "Copies of the financial records, account numbers, transaction histories, everything that shows how the money moved. In exchange, I make sure the authorities know you were coerced, that you're cooperating fully." It took 2 more meetings, but Chen finally agreed. The documents he provided were devastating, a complete roadmap of Carson's corruption going back 5 years. Elizabeth's involvement was documented in detail, including her electronic signature on dozens of fraudulent invoices. Meanwhile, Mickey's network was providing intelligence on Carson's state of mind. The man was unraveling. He'd been drinking heavily, missing meetings, and snapping at subordinates. His poker losses had mounted to the point where he owed money to people who didn't accept IOUs. "He's scared," Mickey reported. "Word is he's been talking about leaving town, maybe taking a long vacation somewhere without extradition treaties." That accelerated my timeline. If Carson ran, Elizabeth would probably go with him, and my chance for complete justice would disappear. I needed to spring the trap before they could escape. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Anna called with urgent news. "Dad, Mom, and Carson are planning something big. I heard them talking about liquidating assets, closing accounts. They're talking about leaving town right after the fundraiser." "How do you know?" "I've been recording their phone calls. Mom doesn't know I cloned her phone." She paused. "I know it's probably illegal, but after what they did to Sam, to you." "Anna, you might have just saved everything. Send me those recordings." The recordings were pure gold. Carson and Elizabeth discussing their escape plan, dividing up the stolen money, even laughing about how they'd fooled everyone. But more importantly, they revealed the location where they were storing the physical evidence of their crimes. A safe deposit box at Morrison Bank, the same bank where David Chen worked. I had everything I needed. Now I just had to orchestrate the finale. The fundraiser was held at the Riverside Country Club on a perfect October evening. Carson had spared no expense. Ice sculptures, a full orchestra, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a day. Half the town's elite were there, along with reporters from 3 newspapers and 2 television stations. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of documents. Mickey and Tony flanked me, both looking appropriately serious. We'd rehearsed this moment for days. Carson was holding court near the bar, basking in the attention of potential voters and major donors. Elizabeth stood beside him in a stunning red dress, playing the role of the successful lawyer and devoted girlfriend. They looked like the perfect power couple. Anna was there too, having convinced her mother that she wanted to support Carson's campaign. What Elizabeth didn't know was that Anna was wearing a wire, and that everything said in her presence was being recorded and transmitted to Tony's equipment in the parking lot. At exactly 8 o'clock, I made my move. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, stepping up to the microphone as the orchestra finished their current piece, "I'd like to say a few words about our guest of honor, Carson Williams." Carson's face went white, but he was trapped by the crowd and the cameras. Any attempt to stop me would look suspicious. Carson Williams represents everything that's wrong with our city's leadership. For the past 5 years, he's been stealing from taxpayers, rigging municipal contracts, and using his position to enrich himself and his associates. The crowd buzzed with confusion and outrage. Reporters moved closer, sensing a story. "I have here financial records showing that Carson Williams has embezzled over $2 million from city projects. I have testimony from multiple women describing his pattern of inappropriate conduct toward colleagues and misuse of power. I have recordings of him and his accomplice planning to flee the country with stolen money." Elizabeth tried to push through the crowd toward the exit, but Mickey was waiting. He didn't touch her, just stood in her way with his arms crossed. "The accomplice I mentioned is Elizabeth Morrison, my wife. She's been helping Carson launder money through fraudulent legal bills, splitting the proceeds, and using her position at Williams, Hartley and Associates to facilitate the largest municipal corruption scheme in our city's history." Carson finally found his voice. "This is slander. This man is mentally unstable. He's been stalking me for weeks." "Then you won't mind if we examine the contents of safe deposit box 247 at Morrison Bank," I said, pulling out the key that David Chen had provided. "The box where you've been storing the evidence of your crimes." The silence was deafening. Then the reporters erupted with questions, cameras flashed, and the crowd pressed forward. Carson looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to run. "You destroyed my family," I said, stepping closer to him. "You broke my son's leg, stole my wife, ruined my reputation, and cost me my business. You thought your money and connections made you untouchable. Jack, please!" "But you made one crucial mistake, Carson. You underestimated me. You saw a blue-collar veteran and assumed I was too stupid to fight back. You forgot that soldiers are trained to adapt, to overcome, to complete the mission no matter what." I turned to address the crowd and the cameras. My mission was justice. Mission accomplished. The FBI agents I'd contacted earlier were waiting outside. They'd been investigating municipal corruption for months, and my evidence had given them everything they needed for arrests and convictions. Carson Williams was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence. Elizabeth followed 10 minutes later, her designer dress and perfect makeup a stark contrast to the steel bracelets on her wrists. As the crowd dispersed and the reporters filed their stories, I stood on the country club's terrace, looking out over the lake. Anna joined me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. You were protecting your mother. I understand that. What happens now? Now we rebuild. Your brother gets justice, those women get justice, and the city gets its money back. As for us, we're still a family, just a different kind than before." Sam arrived on crutches, having discharged himself from the hospital to witness Carson's downfall. "Dad, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Justice usually is, son." Mickey clapped me on the shoulder. "So what's next for Jack Morrison?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I'm thinking about running for city council. After all, there's going to be an opening." The local news led with the story for a week. Carson Williams and Elizabeth Morrison were eventually sentenced to federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. The city recovered most of its stolen funds, and several other officials were implicated in the corruption scheme. Jessica Martinez got her recommendation for law school from the federal prosecutor who handled the case. Patricia Hartley was named managing partner of the reorganized law firm. David Chen received immunity in exchange for his testimony and cooperation. As for me, I won the special election for city council by the largest margin in the city's history. My campaign slogan was simple: integrity matters. On election night, as I stood before my supporters in the same community center where I'd once lost everything, I thought about the long journey from that midnight phone call to this moment of vindication. Elizabeth and Carson had tried to destroy me, but they'd only made me stronger. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better.
이승기. 신청곡 이제 그만해. 이제 어차피 곧 만날 거야. 신청곡 그만해. 어차피 이제 곧 만날 텐데 그 신청곡 그만하세요. 너 일해봤냐? 그래야 잘 살리지 않을까. 아, 유튜브 좀 봤어. 예, 요거씩 유튜브 조금 봤어. 내가 그래도 나이트 웨이터 출신이잖아. 예, 별로지. 별로라니까. 내가 나이트 웨이터 출신이잖아. 그래가지고 대충은 알아. 예, 어떻게 해야 될지. 예, 내가 그래도 누나들이랑 식대 많이 해봤잖아. 느낌 알잖아. 에이, 내가 그걸 모를까? 나도 남자예요. 나도 알지. 누나들이랑 식대도 하는 그런 남잔데 내가 그런 걸 모르겠나? 캐리? 약간 그 방송쟁이들이 없어가지고 내가 그 진짜 또라이로 돌아가면은 옛날에 그 또라이 모습으로 돌아가잖아. 그럼 방송 캐리 돼. 안 해? 요구구씨 안 해. 그거 단단한 남자 안 해. 그거 물소가이 가오가이. 나도 딱 소개할 때 단단한 남자 몰입니다. 딱 요렇게 그거 재밌잖아. 안 해. 그거 재밌더라고. 갑자기 유튜브 들어가는데 그거 뜨더라고. 그거 재밌던데. 그거 재밌어. 발기부전 아니냐고요? 정말 죄송한데 누나, 뽀뽀 누나 정말 죄송한데 부전 끝났어요. 예. 오늘 흑염수탕 먹으니까 갑자기 사람이 달라졌어. 예. 흑염수탕 먹고 고장난 거 고쳐줬어요. 심리적인 게 아니라 영양 부족이었어. 내가 보니까 영양 부족. 틀어줄게. 잠깐만. 야, 아침에도 왔는데 또 점심이나 저녁에도 여기로 오네. 아침에도 왔는데. 야, 좀 더우니까 웬만하면 지하상가에 좀 붙어있자. 우리 웬만하면 지하상가에 좀 붙어 있읍시다. 이 노래 누가 틀었냐고요? 저기 오체 불만족이가 틀어달래.